Welcome, Roomers and Zoomers, to Orange Coast Unitarian Universalist Church for our very, very special Christmas Eve service. My name is Wendy Karn, and I am your intern minister, and it is my sincere pleasure to welcome you here this evening, along with Sean Wilcher, our minister, and Jacob Swetland, our director of music ministries, and Julian Berger on the piano, and of course, our amazing choir. They have some lovely music for you tonight. So before I continue, Roomers, I invite you to silence your cell phones and bring your loving attention to this holiday service. Zoomers, you are also welcome to extend greetings to each other on the text and wish everyone a happy holidays. One of the great traditions of this church is that later in the service, we'll be naming all the babies that were born this year. As the Roomers entered this evening, you were given a piece of paper. So if you would like to write the name of a child that was born this year, you are welcome to do that, and the ushers will come pick them up from you before we get to that point in the service. And if you are on Zoom, you're welcome to write those names in the chat when we get to that piece, and we will include those in the ceremony. And I want to thank, first of all, the many, many volunteers that put these services together every week and on the holidays and all of the time. Thank you so much. I want to remind Zoomers, too, that you can have a candle ready when we do the candle lighting service, so you can join us in that. So I hope that you'll dim all the lights and join us in singing, and let us begin our worship with a special lighting of our chalice. And I invite you to join me in the chalice lighting up on the screen. I will light the candles this Christmas, candles of joy despite all the sadness, candles of hope where despair keeps watch, candles of courage for fears ever present, candles of peace for tempest-tossed days, candles of grace to ease heavy burdens, candles of love to inspire all my living, candles that will burn all year long.
Let us rise in body or spirit and sing our opening song.
Where they lay keeping their sheep on So one of the great things about Christmas is that it's a sturdy holiday. Christmas doesn't wimp out when times are hard. It comes anyway, even if there are hardly any presents, even when there isn't much food to make a feast with, even when you're sad, even if the world around you is at war. Even if you're living in fear and danger and oppression, Christmas still comes. And when it comes, Christmas is subversive. Christmas, with its story of an unwed mother and a doubtful father, with its legend of a helpless baby born in a stable who was worshipped by some of the wisest, richest men in the world, with its tale of the child pursued by the deadly wrath of kings who escaped as a refugee to a foreign land far from home. Christmas, with its ancient enduring summons of peace on earth, goodwill to all people everywhere. You can't stop a day like this with a little hardship or greed or injustice. It will show up anyway, shining the light like a midnight star into the darkest places of our collective lives. Do not underestimate the power of the manger and the hope it holds. The Christmas song of the angels is not as innocent as it sounds. It has turned the world upside down before now, and it still can.
This is how the birth of Jesus the Messiah came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. But after he had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what she is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins." All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. When Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord had commanded, and he took Mary home as his wife.
How's the holy baby, Joseph? Ezekiel, the carpentry foreman where I work, asks me sarcastically, like 10 times a day, "How's the holy baby, Joseph?" I have no choice but to bite my tongue. It's either that or be out of a job, and that's the last thing I need right now. Being chosen by the Lord is an honor. I'm not saying it's not. It's flattering to think that your girlfriend is good enough for God. And on some days, hello. Thank you. And on some days, I can convince myself well enough that it's an honor indeed. But if the guys at work don't act like it's an honor, and none of your friends or family act like it's an honor, well, it just doesn't feel very much like an honor. And so you end up just feeling like your garden variety guy who's been cheated on. Sure, you've been cheated on with the Lord, but still. The thing is, Mary had never lied to me before. Not once. And I knew her heart like I knew my own, but when she told me this business about being visited by an angel, I had an honest-to-God conniption. Stomach pains, rending the clothes from my back, the whole bit. "Is that the best you can come up with?" I asked her. "Don't you have enough respect for me to create something a little less, I don't know, completely insane?" My dad could never understand what I saw in her, but what my dad never stopped to think about was exactly what Mary saw in me. You see, I could be a little high-strung and kind of a worrier, but to Mary, all of that was just adorable. She would shake her head at some of the things I said and laugh like I was the funniest guy in the world. So whenever I got a little down, there was always Mary giggling away like underneath it all I was just a funny man with a kind heart, someone who deserved to be loved. On most days, she made me feel like I really mattered. But there were nights when I couldn't control my anger at the situation. Have to be honest. Sometimes, when I'd spend half the night in tears, I don't think she found me such a laugh riot. One night, I was really starting to lose it, so I went outside to try to cool off. Sitting on a tree stump, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around, and there he was, an angel. Wings and everything. Wow. "Are you the one, with Mary?" I asked, tentatively. "No," he said softly, "I just came here to tell you that what Mary says to you is the truth." "This is a lot to digest," I said. The angel withdrew his hand from my shoulder and left me sitting outside my house, digesting until morning. Even after that, I had my feelings. What did the angel look like? I would ask every so often. What difference does that make? Mary would say, laughing. I just want to know, I'd say. Sometimes I'd ask, what was he wearing? I mean, was he a handsome angel? What do you mean there was a blinding flash of heavenly light? But after a while, I started to feel like a fool. I mean, for God's sake, being jealous of an angel. Then I started to think that the angels must have seen Mary from heaven and knew she was the right one for the job, but they probably didn't get a very good look at me. While they were all lying around on their clouds swooning after Mary, they probably missed her boyfriend in the background griping about Ezekiel and the rusty tools he had me using. Who was I to be raising an angel baby? What could I teach a baby of any kind? How to nail two pieces of wood together? What kid is going to want to hang around with me?
Spirit, and sing our next song.
In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went into the town to register. So Joseph went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in clothes and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them.
Now, The very last thing I needed in the midst of all of this was to load up the mule and take Mary and myself out of town for a census. The Romans were obsessed with counting things, and so everyone had to pack up and be counted in their city of birth, which for Mary and me was Bethlehem. When we got to Bethlehem, it was like everyone and their uncle was there. Every place in town was booked. Mary saw how frustrated I was getting, and she kept saying everything was going to be okay. But I was feeling like if I couldn't even get a room at an inn, what kind of a husband and father was I going to be? If those angels up there thought I was good for anything at all, was maybe that I was the kind of guy who would do everything he could to provide for his family. But it looked like I couldn't even do that much. On the edge of the city, we found a little dive, and it was there, exhausted after a day of being turned down, that I decided I simply wasn't going to take no for an answer. I knocked at the door, and a little bearded man slowly opened it. Before I could speak, he raised his hand. "No dice," he said. "Listen," I said, putting half my body through the door frame, "you've got to have something. I have a pregnant woman here, and she spent the whole trip on a mule." I was tempted to tell him a few more things about the angels and the holy baby, but he just sort of looked over my shoulder and saw Mary sitting there on the mule. He took pity on us. I wasn't crazy about being pitied, but it was getting late. Inside the stable, the animals were completely silent. Not asleep, just quiet. I don't know if you've ever been in a room full of silent animals, but it's eerie. It's weird. I looked at them, and they looked at me. Why did I feel like I was being judged? So I said to Mary, "Look at you, having to sleep in a stable." "Ah, Mary, I feel terrible." Mary reached out and rubbed my cheek, like she always did. Her hand was warm. "I'm just so happy you're here," she whispered. We laid down, and I turned over onto my stomach, and Mary started massaging my back. As she rubbed, I told her how I was feeling, and she kept rubbing, and I started feeling a little better, and then a little better, and I told her so. And when I did, she laughed. And the sound of Mary's laughter was like angels' wings clapping. For the first time in a long time, it felt like things were going to be okay. In about 3 minutes, I was asleep, and sometime after that, Mary was too, her head resting on my back. The thing with me and Mary, whenever we fall asleep, somehow, in the middle of the night, we end up holding hands. And that night, in that stable, when Mary woke in the darkness with a sudden start, like always, our fingers were entwined. And when Mary squeezed my hand, I sprang into action.
I didn't grow up in church, so I didn't hear a lot of the stories that most people did. I heard stories that were tangential to this Christmas story, like the story we just heard. Something gave a little bit of a different perspective. One of the stories that was my personal favorite growing up was The Little Drummer Boy. Do you guys remember seeing that one on television? Is everybody here seeing it? It's still on television? Oh, it is. That's awesome. I love this. So it's one of my favorite stories. It's one of those things. I later learned it was an actual carol. I didn't actually know that. Perry Como does the best version if you ever want to know. And it's a cute story, and it hits me right in the feels every single time, this story. But like all of you, even though I didn't grow up in church, I don't know if maybe you did, but yeah, I still imagined this holy family at the birth, right? So this is what I grew up with, right? A white blonde-haired woman sitting serenely by a crib with Joseph silently and stoically standing by. Wise men dressed up in finery with shepherds and barn animals, all paying deference to this tiny little light shining baby. I imagine sort of soft music playing, pa-rum-pa-pum-pum, right? Such a lovely, serene, and beautiful scene. But I gotta tell you that the ancient hearer or reader of this story would have heard something very different, would have imagined something different. And actually, really, there are two stories, right? There's the story in Luke and the story in Matthew, and they got kind of conflated together over the years, but they were actually quite different stories. But what they would have heard was of a story of a family that was struggling. You have Mary, who is pregnant, who may or may not have been married quite as yet. We know she was engaged to Joseph, but she was an unwed mother. Joseph, her betrothed, was skeptical. It was sort of a potential scandal of the highest order. And of course, then you had the miracle of angels telling them and all, hey, don't be afraid, it's all gonna be good, don't worry about it. But the story wasn't just about a scandal. If we look at the context of these stories, that when they were written in the late first century, about 50 to 70 years after the death of Jesus, we find a people, both the Jews and the Christians, because back then most people didn't actually think of them as entirely different. Christians were just a sort of a sect of Jews back then. They were persecuted, tortured, and even killed by the Romans. The Romans at this time had taken over the area of Israel, what we know today as Israel, and they had in about 70 AD, about 30 to 50 years before these Gospels were written, had completely and utterly destroyed the temple in Jerusalem, the holiest site for all Jews and Christians. And he scattered these Jews and Christians across the lands. We know that the Christians in Rome, in fact, had to live in secret and in fear. They had secret signs that they did to one another because of the fear of torture and crucifixion. It was a time of great fear and horror and despair. And they told these stories to help them deal with these challenges, to give them hope. These birth stories of Jesus were not just about legitimizing the reign of Jesus, so of connecting him in a sense right to the house of David, or all the way back to Adam, or if you're in the Gospel of John, it goes all the way back to the beginning of time. But what they were was helping people see that their Savior, in a sense, was always a beacon of hope. And these stories, well, quite frankly, they're stories, right? Like our story today of a very insecure but steadfast Joseph. Stories that were meant to help people cope with the challenges that they faced. And slowly the story of Jesus became a universal story, the birth of a beautiful and holy child. The story changed over the years as the stories got conflated and they expanded. Because this idea that you had a child born of a God was not an unusual one in the ancient world, right? The idea, however, that the child would be born to these humble parents, born in a barn after being forced from their home by the powers that be, born then also in a feeding trough, or that was hunted by powerful men. These are radical and subversive and universal stories of people gaining hope in the face of oppression. This made Jesus, in a sense, just like them. That is, hunted and poor and afraid. They didn't see a lovely, cute family with a glowing baby in the story. They saw themselves in this story. They saw people hiding, dirty, afraid, tired, hungry. They felt the fear of a woman giving birth to a child without the comfort of a midwife or other women around her. They smelled the hay and the dung of the barn animals. And they felt the hope that came with the three magi, the hope of a child born that would change the world for better, because it couldn't get any worse. They saw their salvation from all that despair, fear, and impotent rage. And this story has changed over the 2,000 years as the church got richer and the oppressed became the oppressors. We have cutified this story, whitewashed it even, because there's no way that Mary was blonde and blue-eyed, okay? We've taken out of its radical and subversive context. But funny enough, I think it still retains that sense of hope that things will get better. Most of us may no longer be able to relate to the radical story, although we know that there are those in the world that can and do. But still, we have our own insecurities, much like Joseph, our own sense of despair, and we all still want hope. We need to hear stories that tell us that the world will be better, that it is getting better. And what better, more universal way of telling that story of hope than through the birth of an innocent babe? And we create new stories that recall the same feelings of hope, whether it's the little drummer boy or the story of Joseph that we heard tonight. And there's really nothing wrong with feeling all the feel-good feelings that come up at Christmas, those stories that bring us, that make us laugh or go, oh, that's so cute. But I invite us to never forget that long ago, it was a tiny babe that brought hope to thousands, and that this tiny babe can continue to bring hope to so many who are oppressed, who feel that rage and are afraid. And this is the truth of the Christmas story. As we continue to tell the story every Christmas and other stories, let us never forget this. Let us shout it from the mountaintops, and let us sing.
Let us rise in body or spirit and sing our final song.
So every Christmas Eve, we take a very special offering. This is for the Ministerial Discretionary Fund. So these are funds, these are money that I use at, well, my discretion, as it were, to help those who are in need, either in the congregation or those in the wider community. And I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be able to offer financial support to those in need, particularly at difficult points in their lives. So I want to invite Tom Lockery here. He's going to tell you a little bit more about it. But after Tom speaks and the choir is singing, the ushers are going to collect the offering. But that's the time to put the baby names in the basket as well, so that we can then read those names out. They'll hand them to me. They'll collect them all and hand them to me. So, and you can always write more than one name on the paper. You can raise your hand and the ushers will bring them over to you if you would like to do that. So, Tom.
Well, I've had an opportunity to do this for a number of years, and I'm happy to do it once again. This is a fund that is like any other fund we have in the church. We have no idea, for the most part, what it's really used for. No details, and it's intended that way. It depends entirely on Sean's discretion as to how and when and to whom we share. And fortunately, in the last few years, we've been very generous, and we've been able to, for the most part, be able to solve some pretty serious problems. Anymore, much of the need is related to housing. It could be people waiting to get the first month's rent, the last month's rent, a security deposit in addition to that. And sometimes it's just beyond what people are able to do, and sometimes it happens at the same time there's a job loss, at the same time that there's a medical problem, and things have to be dealt with, and fortunately we've been able to step up and do that. And it's been through the generosity of us, one time during the year. This is not money we use to pay staff, it's not money we use to pay the utility bills. It's not even money that we'll use to open up a new building. It's money that's going to go out to families in need, individuals in need, and it's up to us tonight to make that happen. And there's a number of ways we can do it. When you sat down, you may have found this little card. If you simply use the QR code on it with the camera on your phone, it'll take you to a site and you'll be able to do it. But we have other ways you can do it as well. There are multiple ways in which you can give to the discretionary fund for the minister. You can mail a check. You can go through our website or use an app called Vanco Mobile. And if you're a roomer, you can also simply use the basket as it is passed along among us by the ushers. The choice is yours, and all the information's on our website should you need it. So as always, thank you very much for your contributions and your generosity. It's much appreciated.
I'm recalling when
We Unitarian Universalists have a beautiful tradition of naming the babies. This is where we acknowledge the beautiful souls that have been born this year, for we Unitarian Universalists affirm that each night a child is born is a holy night.
Now, Zoomers, if you want to wave to the camera, you can wave to them here. Hello, Zoomers. Do you know of a baby that was born this year? If so, you're invited to write it here in the chat. And then we'll read them out loud. The Roomers have written theirs on slips of paper. Though, again, if anybody needs another one, raise your hand and the ushers will bring it over to you. So let us read these wonderful names. So the first one we have is Ever Ezra Eldrith Tompkins.
Gideon,
Breckley Holloway.
Lucinda Hayder Winnett,
Faye Block.
Riley Eddles Williams,
Ginny Gass.
Nor Hamony Way,
Adrian.
Ollie Moody and Max Martin,
Lily.
Killian Ryan,
Another Adrian.
a Matthew,
Maria Coles.
Naya,
Golden.
Penelope,
Twin girls, Sano and Lahela.
Damien,
Cash Hayes.
Emiliano,
Hannah Cruz Schwerin. Let us sing.
For so the children come, and so they have been coming, always in the same way they come, born of the seed of man and woman.
Each night a child is born is a holy night, a time for singing, a time for wondering, a time for worshiping. Each night a child is born is a holy
And indeed, it was a holy night for both hope and faith. No angels herald their beginnings. No prophets predict their future courses. No wise men see a star to show where to find the babe that will save humankind.
Each night a child is born is a holy
Yet each night a child is born is a holy night. Fathers and mothers sitting beside their children's cribs feel glory in the sign of a new life beginning. They ask, where and how will this new life end? Or will it ever end?
Each night a child is born is a holy night, a time for singing, a time for wandering, a time for worshiping. Each night a child is born is a holy night.
Each night a child is born is truly a holy night, a time for singing, a time for wondering, and a time for worshiping.
Each night a child is born is a holy night, a time for singing, a time for wandering, a time for worshiping. Each night a child is born is a holy night.
Let us now sing of peace and of the silent night that peace brings.
Peace, peace, peace on earth and good
of angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flock, then the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among people, to make music in the heart. This service is over. Let always our service continue. And a wonderful, happy new year. It's going to be a good year, I know it.